All right. My name is Robert. I am now sending this recording from Cambodia, Phnom Penh, Cambodia, the capital of Cambodia. And yeah, I'm going to introduce myself through my lecture. So should I just go ahead and start, sir?
Yeah, I hope these other guys get, so Jesse and Harry. Bob was this guy that I met who came to do his PhD in Oxford. He was living and working in Cambodia and LA. He's done a lot of work. How many countries you been in, Bob? 100 plus?
64.
64. Okay, I think I've got the last. This is Connor. Marquis are coming in. This is my friend, Robert O. Marquis. You might have met him in my previous class. But yeah, Bob, I think if you just want to take off, and I'm introducing, tonight I asked him to share a little bit about his own research journey, maybe show you some pictures of the stuff he did. I'm going to tell a story first, just on you. Robert's been in 64 countries. He's been everywhere. He traveled a lot, and he was doing a doctorate, and he was traveling too much. And I said, you have to stop traveling and settle down and do your work in Oxford if you're ever going to finish. And he did. He stopped traveling, and he rented a little apartment, and he did all of his work in Oxford. So he did a great job. And I am very proud to say he's my first student I took all the way through the PhD.
Yeah.
So
Number one.
and he's my number. He calls me, I'm his number one. He's my number one. But we're great friends. He rides motorcycles. He's a very cool guy. And if he was here, he'd be sitting here doing this with you. I do. I love motorcycles. I love motorcycle skiing and climbing big mountains. Hey, here you go. You're all your big guy.
Okay. Well, Dr. Bill asked me to share a little bit about my research journey. And so we should start with Paksu, clapping. My journey with Dr. Bill started at Oxford, OCMS. I did my PhD there, studying on patron-client relationship in Cambodia. I wrote a thesis called Patron-Client Relationship in Cross-Cultural Church Planting, a case study of Cambodia Bible College, not real name, 1998 through 2015. So I defended my exam, oral exam, and May 2018. And you see Dr. Bill behind me. And the suggestion I have for all of you who have to defend PhD or master thesis oral defense, more than what you wrote, I've been praying every day for David Smith that he will pass me regardless of what I wrote. So that's what I did. Power of prayer.
Examine.
Yeah. And then, of course, I graduated. And that was 2019 June. But Bill is more than my number one supervisor. He's my fellow writer. He escorted me out to Mexico trip that I did last year in November. And he rode his bike and escorted me into Mexico, actually all the way to the Mexican border. I was very grateful. So we're fellow writers. I came to America 1973, but I was born 1961. That makes me 60 years old today. Immigrated to America, age 12. What happens when Korean comes to America? You become Korean American. What you call banana, yellow outside, white inside. That's who I am. So I'm banana. You're hearing a lecture from not mango, but banana. I married 37 years ago, happily married. Have 3 beautiful children and 2 awesome rabbits. And I live with an angel. And so we are now at this place called Oasis House. It's my wife's counseling center. It's been there for 5 years, and I run a research center in Cambodia. We live about 6 months a year in Cambodia now. We're ready to settle in. We're purchasing a property now. It will cost us $400,000. I wish I bought this 20 years ago. It would have been $4,000, but when Bill was around.
Right.
But now I teach.
Yeah, it's like our Bible school.
I teach at Cambodian Presbyterian Theological Institute, and this is our students. And this class or this lecture that I'm doing comes out of the research method and thesis writing course I just finished last month. I did a 20-week course on 10 steps of that. So I'm gonna follow the outline. I actually published a book for them through Amazon and learning how to research in Cambodia. You can look it up. I am actually basing my lecture on that. And also a second book is Kappenul, Korean Patriotic Dynamics. That's out of my PhD work. And it's also sold in Amazon. So out of 2 books, I taught a course on research method and I produced 20 lecture. CPTI means Cambodia Presbyterian Theological Institute. And I have 20 lectures, including your professor's lecture here, which I did with him a few weeks ago. And it's aired in Dr. Babo TV. It's my YouTube channel. You could go there. You should subscribe definitely and push the like buttons. I got 20 lectures on that if you want to do it thoroughly.
Let me tell you something. This guy is a born entrepreneur. He invents stuff every day, something new. This is good though. Let them see this slide, Bob. So this is a different way of how if we had 20 weeks, this is a good organization for how to work, and you can recognize some of what you're doing in 8 weeks.
So the outline that I'm using is this, the same outline that I use for 20 weeks. And I start with, what is your research question? So Dr. Bill asked me to talk on this. So I thought I'll just follow the progression of my lecture previously. Step 1 is research question. What is your research question? Keep calm and formulate your research question. Right? The first question about research question is, what is your research question, not someone else's? Okay, that's very important, that you must own up to your research question. Don't entertain a research question that sounds fancy or sounds it's like profitable, sounds like that's what everybody's doing. Don't give a hoop about what everybody else is doing. Just think about what is yours, not others, not even what Bill wants you to do or your mama wants you to do, not your mama's research question, your research question. That's number 1. Why? Because it should come out of who you are. What do you really want to know? What do you really want to find out? Not based on your liking, but based on who you are. Okay, this is very important. And this is something that I realized because I actually, when I was in PhD, I asked my wife to wake up in the morning and instead of saying good morning to me, I trained her to ask, what is your research question? Every morning we woke up, my wife was not good morning, but what is your research question? And I'm like, try to formulate. And then it took me 2 years.
I think
It took me 2 years to formulate my research question. Out of who I am, not what I like, because I like things, I like many, many different things, but not what I like, but who I am. I am a pastor, okay? That's where I started. Okay, I'm a pastor. I'm not a professor. I am not academician. I'm a pastor. That's where I started my research question. But then you have to ask, what kind of pastor are you? Right? There are all kinds of pastors, youth pastor, music pastor, worship pastor, administrative pastor, senior pastor, right? College pastor. I realized I'm a church planting pastor. I'm a church planting pastor. So my desire is to know everything about church planting. My research question comes out of that, who I am. I'm a church planter. I planted 5 churches in Southern California in 20 years, right? One in South Central too. Some brother is planting a church in South Central. Talk to me later. I plant a church next to Slauson Park where Bloods and Crips began. Okay. Out of the years, we had 3 of my members executed gangster style. One guy point blank at the head at the Slauson Park. So our church was block away from Slauson Park. I planted 5 church plants in Southern California. So I know church planting. That's my heart passion because my primary gifting as a role is apostle. I'm an apostle planting churches. And also because of that, we start a 27 church planting project in Siberia from 2003. So 2003 went on and we planted 27 churches with GMI, Grace Church in Fullerton, And then we start training them. I flew into Russia every 6 months, one time in Moscow, one time in Siberia, every year. And then just recently, until recently, we saw this young couple grow up, planting church. And now one church became mega church there and planted 10 more churches. We had such a successful run in Siberia. I thought surely same thing could happen in Cambodia. So I start coming to Cambodia year 2000. Question. As a church planting pastor, I asked the question, why isn't church planting prospering in Cambodia? Okay. Now, what is your research question? It should be question, keep it as a question. It is not an answer. Okay? If you start with the answer, your research is a book. Don't write a book. Your research is not a book. It should not end up as a book. Your thesis will eventually spin off as a book, but not during your research. Don't look for something, because then when you look for something, you'll find it, right? So that was the critical mistake I had, because I had, how can Cambodian pastors overcome their aid dependency issue? That's not a research question. That's the title to a book. That's different.
I don't understand what he said. Hang on. How can Cambodian pastors overcome their aid dependency issue? Because there's so much money coming into Cambodia. Cambodia's had a civil war for 30 years. So money's coming from Korea and it's coming from America. So Bob wants to know, how can they overcome this aid dependency? Who created the aid dependency? The Americans and the Koreans. So I said to Bob, you got to look at the back of your own eyeball. This is a problem you guys have created, not the Cambodians. That was a big turn for him, because he was studying aid dependency. So he stepped back. Go ahead, Bob.
So the question that I raised was, why not in Cambodia? So keep everything as a research question. Do not make a conclusion. Do not make a statement. Do not impose your thought into the research question, because keep it as a question. That's the key point. And let it stem out of who you are. Then you could be passionate about it, right? So, and then I start, and then Methodist in Cambodia, they planted 150 churches, no longer, because it now costs them $16,000 per month to run these 150 churches. So they stopped. At $16,000 per month budget, they stopped. So then I have to ask question, is it a financial issue? Because they made it into financial issue. They said, we ran out of money and we couldn't do any more church plant. So then I asked, really, is it really financial issue, right? Put that on the wall. I put my primary research question on the wall. And then I read it every day. Not only my wife wake up in the morning, ask, what is your research question? I said, ma'am, my primary question is, what are the key effects of patron-client dynamics between Korean missionaries and Cambodia in their joint church planting project, ma'am? What is the secondary question? What are the effects of patron-fathering dynamics in church planting process, ma'am? And I let her drill it into my brain so that I live, eat, and breathe my research question during my PhD years. So research question, very, very important. Then you begin to do literature review. I heard that some of you are in this stage. Good. And then you do research, not on Google, but Google Scholar. You know that there's a difference. Some of you still don't know, so I'm asking this. Go to Google Scholar, and then I typed Cambodia aid dependency. Now, order of words is completely important, very important, because if I put aid dependency Cambodia, I would have different result. But when you put Cambodia first, the keywords, what is the country? Cambodia. Yeah, aid dependency issue is not Cambodian specific. So you have to be Cambodia, aid dependency. Then you will find all kinds of stuff. That was my 2009 search. And then I found Leisurewood, Judy Leisurewood. My goodness, it cracked open my case. Leisurewood start talking about patron-client relationship. I said, that's it. It's not money issue. It's a relational issue. So when I found her, I Google Gaga over her. I found out everything about her. I made this PCD Scholar page, Patron-Client Dynamic Scholar. So I have a whole folder full of Patron-Client Dynamic Scholars. So I actually print 10 pages, 15 pages of her and what she wrote and who she is. I even have her access to her email and a telephone number. And then you create and then she became my cultural anthropologist.
If you write people, they will write you back. Scholars will write you.
Absolutely, they will write back. And she became my key informant. This is a key term. Whether in the literature review or in your interview, there is always a key informant. You do 100 interview, there are only few who could really tell you what's going on down there because they have been thinking about it. All this other interview is a statistic. You zoom into your key informant, whether you're reading a book or interview. She became my key informant because she informed me, and then you put that on the wall. Okay, you put that on the wall and write notes. Yeah, man, you could be when they do the movie on your life, you could be the beautiful mind guy. You could be the beautiful mind. And so
you know movie The Beautiful Mind. That's a good assignment. Watch it. See what he's doing in that movie.
Yeah, and then you have to make sure that arrows going in and out. Who's informing who? Who is she informing? And then I found out James Scott is another crazy guy. Wow, he's a political in the area of political arena, but huge. And then I found Eric, and then I found, oh my gosh, Professor Eisenstadt, Hebrew University. He's another key informant. I'm gonna go in detail. And I realized he was informed by Martin Buber, my philosophical hero, and then my Soren Kierkegaard. So I realized it's existentialistic understanding. And then I found Muno, and Muno's a German guy, huge. And then I found Foster, I found Chandler, and then I found Nicholas Harkness, Harvard professor on specialty in Korean language. So you put it all together and then create a wall, okay? And then you walk around talking to yourself. I said, okay, that's what they're saying. But what is the key thing out of their saying, right? What is the key thing? That's your research question, okay? So out of the conversation with this literature that you read, okay? Now, if you put that in your computer, let me tell you right now, you are not that smart, okay? You are not that smart to remember all the scattered information in the screen. Your screen is not as big as that wall, okay? If you put your computer to a wall, then you could do it. I realized that, I was smarter than Einstein at this point because now I have everything on the wall. And then I could talk to, I said, that's what you said. And then I'll stick it, this little, whatever they said, I'll stick it on the wall. Okay, that's what you said. But what is it? And then he led what? To this what? Research question, okay? It's very important. Okay, and that wall, I have this O.C. Bach. You see that? Okay, out of the research question. Now, out of the research question, I put this red tag called O.C. Bach. What is O.C. Bach? What is O.C. Bach? Okay, if you're a PhD student, your oral examiner asks, so what is your O.C. Bach? Or what is your original contribution to the body of knowledge? I just called it O.C. Bach, right?
Now, Bob, let me make a point. You are not having to make much in way because you're not being you're defending a doctorate. But a master should aspire to be able to contribute some knowledge. So whatever you're digging into, it's not just a description, it's some piece. That's why I talked earlier tonight about theory. You need to have enough footprint in the literature and in the theory to we don't make a big deal of that in this class, original contribution. If you go on and go further, this is Featherstone. You don't do this, you don't pass. And I mean, you can study for 6 years, sit for a PhD exam and fail it because you did not make an original contribution to knowledge. So that for Bob was like together, the supervisor and the student have to wrestle with all this stuff. I mean, it's not just oh, he's got it done. It's a constant process. Go ahead, Bob. That's great. I didn't know what O.C. Bach was. So you wrote it out that way.
Well, This is an example of OC Bach for you then. So year 2021, I type in A dependency Christian churches, right? Guess what? Out of the first 4 articles, 3 were my articles. And I said, yes. So when you go Google Scholar and then type those keywords, out of 4, 3 are mine. That means I did make an original contribution to the body of knowledge. So anybody who studied that now would have to read my paper. So then I said, Google, A dependency books, right? And then guess what? Out of the image, hey, one of them was my book that I published through Regnum. That's the other book that I published through Regnum in UK. Church planting in patronage culture. Out of Regnum, out of my PhD, 2 books came out of the Regnum, and that's one of them. That's a shorter version. So that's how you know that you made original contributions. So whoever's doing a book on A dependency now have access to my book, and you could buy through Amazon. So that's great. So then you have 1,000 books you could read from. What do? You make a reasonable choice of what you want to read. I don't know for a master program how many books you have to read. I used 300 books for my PhD, right? So you skim them. You cannot read all of them. You skim. What is a skimming?
I would assume you would do at least 50 books.
Okay.
From courses you take and your own work.
Yeah. And this is the word that Dr. Bill Prevette told me, Bob, don't read, ransack your books. It's a ransack your books. What is ransacking? It's called, like a LA rioters, 1992. They went into store and then they knew exactly what they wanted, right? That's called ransacking.
This is Bobo's translation of ransack. Find the goods.
Yeah, be a rooter.
Very good, Bob. That's a great picture.
Yeah, be a rooter. Go in and just grab what you want. Don't hang around. It's like in Cambodian context, this is how I taught my students. If you want to make a amok is a fish dish with, beautiful fish dish. So if you want to make amok, I ask my students, would you go Lucky Market and go to fruit section? And they said, no, we don't need fruit for amok fish dish. Would you go to the meat section? They said, no, we don't need to go. Where do you go? We go fish market, right? You don't go Lucky Market, you go fish market. Why? Well, it's like that. Literature review is like that. You go through books, ransack them, and choose the books you know, because whether title says or content says, or bibliography says, or table of content is critical. Go through books, first page, right? When was it published? 75 years ago. Throw it away. When was it published? 5 years ago. Good. Who published it? Table of content. Does it have a content, at least a chapter in what you're looking for? Ransack them, right? And then choose what you're going to read wisely, right? And then read parts. Don't read the whole book. It's not Bible, right? You're not reading a Bible. You're not reading from Genesis to Revelation. You don't have to do that. Read a paragraph, read the conclusion, and argue with the book. When you read, shout out, you talk to, go a little crazy, I disagree, because basically research is an argument. Your master thesis should be an argument. You should say something original, right? I don't care if it's master or PhD. You should say something original. If you agree with everybody said, why write a paper? I mean, it's boring, right? And make note while you're reading. And use the note, right? Like Patron-Client. I read about her, and then that literature led me to Eisenstedt, right? And when I read this is the Bible for Patron-Client dynamic. If you're going to write next PhD on Patron-Client, and if you don't use Eisenstedt, I'll say, do it again, do the research again. It's like you're writing a history of, computer software, and you forgot to mention Bill Gates. It'll be like that. How can you write the history of, Microsoft without mentioning Bill Gates? If you're doing Patron-Client study and if you don't mention him, you have not done right. Do it over, right? So then you begin to understand, wow, this is Patron-Client. It was not a money issue. It was a relational dynamic between Korean missionaries. And I found them to be patron. And Wolfgang Uno start informing me about Patron-Client dynamics in grabs. And then then I put all that thoughts on the wall. Another wall. Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to be.
Let me just pause. If students would do that right there, you'd solve your problems. You actually mapped out what you're thinking about and writing it out and put it on the wall and look at it and decide what really should be on the wall. I mean, when I went to his apartment, I couldn't believe, because my office looked like this. And I didn't tell him to do any of this. This is his own work. But if you do this kind of work, you see how he's mapping, it's not blown up, but you can see he's mapping his thoughts out. I don't know why. This is because you don't know how to, I guess most of us don't know how to think critically. You've got to question the ideas. You've got to move the stuff around. It's not just a matter of writing a paragraph and I'm done. This is the sort of thing I think it's invaluable for researchers.
So, for example, now you decided it's patron-client dynamic. In what area? Socioanthropology. So you write the keyword, role of patron-client. And then I wrote, who wrote in 50s? Oh, Eric Wolf. Who wrote in 60s? Oh, these guys. Who wrote in 70s? Who wrote 70s? And how come he stopped? There was a stop, pause for about 30 years. In 2000, whoa, wait a minute, picked up by Muno. And so all this arrow means something. Well, Clifford informed him, and then he went down here, and then, oh, okay. And so you begin to understand your thoughts on the wall. And then it gives you the research question, right? So then what you put on the wall now, you need to digitize. So you have to start filing them away. And all of you have this already. But I begin to realize, even my master program students at Cambodia, they don't know what filing system is because they never had it. So I'm telling, maybe sharing this with you and students in America, maybe few of you still haven't really thought through or even have a plan. So this is what you do. When you go to, now in this case, you'll be master thesis. So create just a single file that you could click to, then gives you all this stuff that you're on your master. So major concept, right? Pre-research, appendix file, bibliography file, computer software file, dean's review file, interview file, methodology file, research stage file, seminar file. And when you click, it leads to another one. So let me click major concept. When I click there, all these major concepts will pop. A dependency issue, a effectiveness issue, animism, Buddhism, case study issue, coding issue, epistemology, Gap-and-Earl issue, grounded theory issue, subaltern study was a huge, social exchange theory. I even have a Bill Prevette section here, right? Then you go A dependency, you click it, then you now on A dependency, you got all this stuff that you found out. What you need to do is turn everything to PDF. Turn everything to PDF. Because doc file changes. Don't keep it in doc because doc changes. Turn everything to PDF, and everything you see here, I printed in Oxford. And then now I have a 3 full-size folder that I gave it to Pastor Bill Prevette. I gave it to Dr. Bill Prevette. He kept it at Oxford Library for anybody who wants to learn about A dependency. They don't have to print again. They had close to, I think, 700-800 pages of in the binder format.
This is
of
my
all the stuff.
I've got a library now, and any student I work with, they have to create this amount of work, or they're not doing the work. So let me just take a second, Bob. You're in graduate school. You're coming to take these classes. Don't just expect us to give you a reading list. If that's what you're expecting, you're not going to get any real value out of this. We'll give you, like, I don't know, I didn't give hardly any books. You should at least come up with your a reading list, your own stuff, file it. And then when you take Roger's class or you take Doug's class, read beyond what they give you to read or start looking. Because that's the object of earning a master's degree. And then when you get done with it, you've got resources. You can turn and say, oh yeah, I did some work on that. I can share that with you. So it's not just for you. You turn around and share it with other people. So don't see it just as it's just not your own personal private collection. Bob, you gave me that dependency file on a stick. I think I've got it printed out upstairs in the office.
Yeah. So let's say that you go to another item, not major concept, but let's say, hey, thesis. Let's say you're writing your master thesis now, that you should have a specific thesis file again, so that you could click, and then go there. In the thesis section, When you click there, I got 2014, 2015, 2017 file. Okay, so 2017 file, when you click it there, I would have first draft, second draft, all the way up to 13th draft. Okay, so 13th draft was what I submitted. Okay, before I was oral exam. So when you keep it in a systematic order, just in case you lose it, train of thought, then at least you could just backtrack. Don't just work on one file, rest of your thesis. Then you could mess up. You could have take the wrong turn. Then you could trace back to, for example, right here, I did June 12th, 2017, and then I worked on for 3 months and I created a new file in August. In case I have a corruption or a different thought, take a different train, then I could go back. So that's a key thing, right? And when you start in the file system, you need to back up. Very important. Number one, back it up in your computer. I mean, you do that all the time. Your computer does it automatically. But keep an external hard drive or a stick that you carry. Carry several of them, just not one, right? And then, of course, you use your Dropbox or something. So I had 3 different ways. I use iCloud or Dropbox. I use my computer and I use my memory stick. Okay. Your memory stick will keep all your file because you're not a movie producer. You're writing a 150-page paper. So now one terrible example. My friend who was doing PhD in London, he was at London Heathrow Airport, and then he took a flight, and then somewhere between London and Iceland, he realized he left his laptop at London Heathrow Airport. He had to go to bathroom and then to rush into airplane, and he did not keep any backup for 5 years, 4 to 5 years. Guess what? He quit PhD because he couldn't backtrack of all the 4 years of research. Now, he had a permanent heart damage, PhD, permanent heart damage, and he never got PhD. Yeah, so please back up and direct and decide on the direction of your paper. I'm gonna just skim through this because it's not important, but it was very important for my students. And I wish, even as a master level, you need to kind of think through that. Am I gonna do a deductive or inductive study? What do you mean by that?
We haven't talked, Bob, we haven't talked about these words. They'll come up next week. Can you go back to that slide, back one?
Okay.
This one. Deductive, starting with a theory, or confirming a theory, and then you want to do quantitative research. So we're going to talk about operationalizing the research next week. Try to keep this in mind. If you start with data, then you infer conclusions from data. You're drawing data out, you're getting ideas out. These are 2 approaches to do research. Everybody in here so far is working with inductive, because none of you are trying to do theoretical research. Theoretical research is you're starting with theory and trying to really drill into the theory and change or improve the theory. None of you have come to me with theoretical questions. Okay?
So yes, so inductive reasoning, you make observation, observe the pattern, tentative hypothesis, and then you tend to be qualitative, right? So you need to decide the direction, very important. For me, I did qualitative, data-driven. So in my interview, I begin to hear people say spiritual father, 아버지, 영의 아버지 is in Korean. I did both interview, English and Korean. And then that gave me an idea that, oh, they're talking about patron as father. And then that led me to the next stage, patron as sponsor, that led me to patron as partner. So the whole thesis came about through my research, those 3 findings. Once you have a theory in making, you put it on the wall and you know what you're doing, you have your research question and you're engaged in research, then write like crazy. Start writing, just write, right? Don't stop, Writing in your bathroom, writing everywhere, right? Write everywhere, notebook, back of the Bible, back of the napkin, Post-it. I use Post-it, large Post-it constantly. Write it and put it on the wall, right? And start categorizing them. Once you put in this separate, like then you could categorize it, just like what I did. I use all my 3M cards and then categorize in different color, okay? Just like that. I categorize it and put it now in order. You see how your conceptual stuff, and then you categorize it in color and shape, And then this is the end result, right? The author's different shape, color's different, main theme is different color, and then you arrows different, and then you talk to yourself. Talk to yourself. What am I getting at? What am I really doing? You know? And then you realize you have this aha moment. Hey, they're talking about father here. Hey, they're talking about sponsor here. Hey, they're talking about partner here. Well, there's your thesis, right? And then okay, once you get to that, now you have make system to keep printing of all your writing in separate file. So what you do is now print it and then categorize it. This is about aid dependency. This is about churches. This is about church planting. This is a CPTI policy. This is patron-client. This is cop and earth. This is animism. This is interview file. This is BBW. And then put them on the wall again. Yeah, we all have walls, right? Right. You don't have to be rich to do PhD. You just need to have walls.
People come into your room and think you're crazy.
Yeah. So you categorize your walls based on your topic and then make the core argument. So all your chapters, you have to make core argument. It has to be all over. Every chapter has to make core argument. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, conclusion, all has to make a core argument as a core of your thesis. Why? Look, you think this is a messy, but look right here. Guess what? Guess what I have written there? You see? You know what it is? Research question. Research question.
Still on the wall.
On the wall.
Always on the wall.
Right? And then right below my research question, guess what? My core argument. What is my core argument? I argue that only when patron functions as a father, assuming the tripartite role as parent, sponsor, and partner, that the client is able to progress from the role of dependent child to equal partner. Everything I wrote, 300 pages, it talks about that. That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm talking about. That's my original contribution. Because up to this point, patron-client was only viewed as a financial issue. A dependency was developed about financial issue. I said, no, it's a relational issue, not financial issue, right? Write a core argument, write about it, and write them out in chapters. Now I wrote them, everything in chapters. And put it on the wall again. Put it on the wall, chapter by chapter now, right? So that you could talk to each chapter. Like you see this text right here? And I said, you know what? Chapter 5 is lacking in this point. And then stick it, right? Stick it here. Stick chapter 6, lacking in this point. What is the original contribution in chapter 4? What is this? What is this? And then that you take the chapter out and then retype it, type it, and then print it, put it back again. You do that for a good 8 years, and you're going to be, your head will be permanently damaged. Then you get PhD. So
now this I want y'all to keep in mind, this is a guy that's actually, started out, and he in the first 2 years was all over the map. I mean, I love you, Bob, but in the first 2 years, I really wondered if he was ever going to get this done. Because he was trying to speak here, speak there, he'd speak in Hong Kong, speak in Korea, he'd fly around the world. He'd come to Oxford, he'd work for 2 weeks, and we wouldn't see him for 2 months. And he was going and going and going. And finally, it just came down to, Bob, you got to get this done. You got to focus on it. Got the mind. So when he locked himself in this, that's the apartment in Oxford, he put himself in a room. Now, the work he's done, you just have to get this to scale. How long are you going to be studying during a master's? 2 years. What for you, Bob? How many years?
9 years.
How many on there? 9 years. The first 3 or 4, he was all over the map. Finally, when he starts to get settled down, he was reading, but he starts to settle down. So let's just take this to scale. You got a 2-year project. You want to start figuring out what reason you see this, you create a method. And at the end, if you do this, when you have your capstone project, like Kobe, you're already there. If you've been doing this through the course of the work, you're done. All you really got to do is just kind of wrap it up. So this course that you're sitting in with me is only to create a very simple blueprint that you turn in as a final assignment and grade it. If you don't do some of what he's done here, you're going to be kind of wondering what to do with your blueprint. Because your blueprint is just simply, here's what I suggest. And the reason I asked Bob to show this stuff is that of all this, I worked with lots of students. He was a machine once he got into it, and it shows. I mean, he's published work, he's published books. He was already publishing small books, and the guy's very creative. I mean, Bob's got a highly creative mind. But I mean, I hope what you can see in this is there's some method madness. Like if you watch The Beautiful Mind, the guy's a madman, but he's also got a method. And I think, Bob, you is this the last slide? Do you have more?
No, I have more. So
You have
what
more.
you do is, when you have chapter by chapter like this, you need to present to others. When you write for others, not PhD, but chapter by chapter, then you really get to test the peer counseling or peer pressure, or what do you call it, peer advice. So I actually published and presented at Yale on 2019, Yale and Edinburgh series. So it was pretty neat. I was able to do that. And then I went to present in Korea, 2016, at a major conference, IAMS conference, International Association of Mission Studies. I presented my paper at ASM Academic Forum in Bali, Indonesia. And then I presented my paper in Beirut, Lebanon, 2018. And my findings actually became a book by J.H. Georges and published through IVP. So it's very important that you present your paper, then you get criticized, then you could kind of do that. Yeah, you're right, Pastor, Dr. Bill, master level, you don't have to do all that, but at least share with your peers. And they share at internet, it's free. You don't have to be invited to. I start publishing my stuff at academia.edu. 149 users, scholars use it. And I published about 60 books, and I put all my books free of charge, and they're on my paper free of charge. And so now I have several hundred followers, and now they're downloading my books from Saudi Arabia. Can you believe that? In Africa. So you have this forum, this platform for free of charge. I have Dr. Babo TV. I'm constantly publishing. It's all available for free. I publish for free, and then I create. And so, yeah, if you have a master friend who wants to learn, come to my site. Thank you. 박수.
That's a course on a course, what he did tonight. He ran you through a course.
Yeah.
And I hope kind of the point is that he's been asked to do this. Now, your students, Bob, let's talk about this. You have master students in Cambodia.
Yes, sir.
How old are they?
Oh,
how old are they?
They're in their, let's see, 30s, late 20s and 30s, 8 of them. They're doing their master program in English, which is fantastic.
All of those kids' parents went through something called the time of the killing fields. Cambodia, over a third of the people were killed by the Khmer Rouge. So Cambodia was torn apart like Syria is being torn apart. In the 1970s, Cambodia, before Bob and I got there, a massive internal genocide, an auto-genocide, where a small number of communist guys killed a third of the population. They destroyed every bank, every business, every school in the country was closed. Cambodia was reduced to basically the Stone Age. And in 1990, when missionaries could go in, I went in 91, you were returning to an absolute mess. Nothing worked. There was no electricity. Forget cell phones. There were guns on the streets everywhere. You could buy a hand grenade for $5. And now the country, you saw the Bible school. What's this been, 1990 to today? 30 years. And if you don't believe about China, go visit Cambodia. They've rebuilt the country literally in 30 years. And it's just amazing the stuff that's gone on there. But Bob's working with master's students there that, I mean, they're having to work really hard. Is their English pretty good, Bob? Robert, yeah. They speak good English?
Yes, amazingly.
And this,
very good. So
this is one of my kind of pet peeves about being home. I don't think people in this country appreciate what they have. And I don't think they appreciate the opportunities they have. And I had some college kids sitting here this morning. I give them a pretty hard time. So I say, you kids you think this is just the way it's supposed to be. Half the world would kill to have this. And they eventually might destroy your country to have this. because you're broadcasting to the whole planet. What a great party you're having in America. So research, as I say all the time, part of it's kind of a prophetic process to try to uncover things. You don't have to go to the great depth that Bob did, but you ought to be aspiring to some of the things that he's alluded to, doing the research, the literature. Why don't you spend a few extra hours on it? Isn't it worth it? Don't you think your contribution to other people in your life matters? So invest in reading, invest in writing, invest in yourself. You got a 2-year window to do it. And the master's degree used to mean you were a master of a subject area. Now you're going to learn different things. You're going to learn leadership methods and organizational things. It's a flatter, not a straight up and down thing. But I hope, I mean, that was great, Bob. You ran through that so fast, but do you get the sense of the kind of work that goes into something like that? So I told him, we've got time for Q&A. Does anyone want to ask any questions? I think I can turn this. Let's turn that one.